In a ballroom filled with strangers, a billionaire knelt before a woman everyone thought was just a nanny. He whispered a proposal. "You didn't just care for my son, you healed him. You reminded me what love feels like. Leah, will you marry me?" And before she could even answer, a little boy's voice rang out. "Mommy!" The crowd froze. Glasses halted midair. Some gasped, some cried. In that one word, a new family was born. What happened next changed everything. But this story didn't begin in a ballroom. It began on a rainy evening, with suspicion, a secret, and a woman caring far more than anyone realized. To understand how a nanny became the heart of a billionaire's world, let's go back to the beginning. Ethan Grayson wasn't always a man of silence and schedules, but since the death of his wife Claire 3 years ago, the once vibrant tech mogul had buried himself beneath marble walls and polished routines. His mansion, an architectural marvel perched atop the Seattle hills, was immaculate, breathtaking, and utterly hollow. The only light that flickered in his world now was his son, Oliver, a boy of just 6, who had stopped laughing the day his mother left and had never quite started again. Ethan loved his son deeply, but grief had a way of building walls even between those closest to us. Ethan's world had shrunk into board meetings, legal memos, and the sound of his own footsteps echoing through an empty home. Every interaction with Oliver felt like walking on glass, delicate, cautious, and far too quiet. Then came Leah Monroe. She arrived quietly one rainy Monday morning, clutching a modest resume and wearing a coat 3 seasons old. Ethan hadn't expected much. He had interviewed half a dozen nannies before her, each one perfect on paper, and yet none able to break through Oliver's silence. But Leah was different. She didn't speak to Oliver like he was broken. She spoke like he was a whole person still in hiding, gently coaxing him out with bedtime stories, sidewalk chalk, and questions like, "What's your favorite sound in the world?" Within a week, Oliver was drawing again. Within a month, he was laughing. Softly at first, then in bursts that echoed through the long hallways. Ethan watched from a distance, arms crossed, heart wary. She was kind, consistent, never intrusive, but there was something else, something unspoken in the way she looked at his son, and the way she moved through the house as if she were quietly stitching the pieces back together. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something stir. He didn't know what it was yet. Curiosity, maybe, or something deeper. But he knew this much. The woman who came to care for his son was starting to reach a part of him he thought had died with Claire. And that terrified him more than he cared to admit. It happened late one night, almost by accident. Ethan Grayson was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water when he heard a voice through the slightly ajar laundry room door. Leah's voice, low, urgent. "I'm doing everything I can, but I need the money soon. Please, don't give up on me." The line went quiet, then a frustrated sigh, followed by the soft creak of the door closing. Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, glass forgotten in his hand, that single line looping in his mind like an echo. "I need the money soon." The next morning, Leah arrived on time, smiling gently at Oliver, helping him with his socks, humming while packing his school snack. Nothing about her seemed different, except now Ethan couldn't unhear the desperation in her voice. Was she in trouble? In debt? Hiding something? He didn't want to be the man who snooped, but he was also a father, and Oliver adored her. So that evening, when Leah ended her shift and quietly left through the front gate, Ethan followed. He kept a safe distance in his black Mercedes, headlights dimmed. Rain streaked down the windshield as Leah boarded a city bus heading south, far from the polished neighborhoods of their world. The bus rumbled through aging districts, past flickering signs and cracked sidewalks, until it stopped near a faded blue building with a crooked sign, Hope Haven Community Center. Ethan parked across the street, watching as Leah stepped inside, her canvas bag still slung over her shoulder. Minutes passed. Then he saw her again, inside a brightly lit room filled with children. Some sat cross-legged on worn mats. Others played with paper crafts and broken crayons. And Leah was right in the middle of them, smiling, laughing, kneeling to tie a boy's shoelace. handing out handmade scarves, reading aloud from a dog-eared picture book as a little girl leaned against her arm. There was no deceit, no hidden agenda, just kindness, pure and unfiltered, like sunlight cutting through the gray. Ethan leaned back in his seat, jaw clenched with guilt. She hadn't been hiding darkness. She'd been hiding goodness. And he had followed her expecting the worst, only to discover the very best. Ethan returned home that night with a quiet storm brewing inside him. Not anger, not regret, but something far more humbling. Shame. He had followed Leah because he doubted her, and in doing so, he'd uncovered not a threat, but a heart that gave without asking anything in return. He couldn't sleep. The next morning, while his staff prepared breakfast, Ethan slipped out to the kitchen with a box of pastries and a handwritten note. It simply read, "For the kids, from someone who believes in them." He drove back to Hope Haven before dawn and left the package just inside the doorway. He didn't knock. He didn't wait to be seen. He just left it, then returned to his marble world. That evening, Leah arrived for work 10 minutes late, her cheeks flushed, her hair damp from the walk. In her hand was the note. "Mr. Grayson," she said softly, standing just inside the kitchen, "did you leave something at Hope Haven?" He didn't turn around right away. "Maybe," he said. She stepped closer. "Why?" He finally faced her. "Because I was wrong about you." Their eyes met. The air between them shifted, no longer stiff or uncertain, but open, tentative. "They love the pastries," Leah said, her voice lighter than usual. "Thank you." "You shouldn't have to do it alone," he replied. "Let me help." She hesitated. "This isn't charity." "I know," he said. "It's admiration." From that moment on, something unspoken began to grow. Trust, once cracked, began to mend, quietly like a sprout breaking through winter soil. Ethan didn't push. Instead, he found small ways to support Leah's mission. One afternoon, he donated a box of colorful building blocks labeled, "For Oliver and his friends." Another day, he arranged for a local bookstore to donate children's books to Hope Haven, all under the name of a fictional foundation. Leah never questioned it aloud, but each time she discovered a new gift, her eyes lingered on Ethan a little longer. Their conversations, once confined to schedules and meals, began to stretch. They talked about Oliver's dreams, Leah's childhood, the books she loved, the stories that stayed with her. One morning over coffee, Ethan asked, "What made you want to work with children?" Leah smiled faintly. "Because when I was a child, someone showed up for me. Just once. But it was enough to make me believe I mattered." Ethan didn't reply right away, but in that silence, he realized something profound. Leah wasn't just healing the children at Hope Haven. She was healing him too, not with grand gestures or declarations, but with patience, quiet persistence, and the kind of goodness that speaks softly, yet echoes forever. It was one of those slow, golden afternoons when the world felt quieter than usual. The late autumn sun cast soft rays through the tall windows of the Grayson estate, and in the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon and apples lingered in the air. Leah was helping Oliver build a cardboard castle on the floor, carefully attaching paper flags to the towers. Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, quietly watching the scene. His son was laughing again, freely, deeply, the kind of laugh he hadn't heard since Claire passed. When Oliver ran off to grab another marker, Ethan stepped into the room and said gently, "He's different with you. He's happier." Leah looked up, her cheeks flushed from the playful chaos. "He's an incredible kid. He just needed someone to see him." Ethan sat down across from her, the cardboard tower separating them like a soft barrier. "Can I ask you something personal?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." "What made you want to work with kids?" There was a pause, a stillness that wasn't uncomfortable but heavy with memory. "I grew up in a children's home," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "Never knew my parents. Bounced from one place to another. I don't remember much warmth. Just cold sheets and stricter rules." Ethan didn't interrupt. He let her speak in her own time. "But there was this one woman," Leah continued, "a volunteer who came every Saturday. She didn't do much, just read to us, brought cookies, let us color. But for that 1 hour, we weren't statistics. We were kids again. I never forgot how that felt. She glanced at him, eyes shimmering with something unspoken. So I promised myself, if I ever had the chance, I'd do that for someone else. Ethan looked at her, really looked. This wasn't just a job to Leah. It was her purpose, her redemption. And Oliver, he asked. She smiled softly. He reminds me of who I was. A little lost, a little guarded, but still full of wonder. And he's made me believe I could be more than just a helper, that maybe I could be a part of something. Ethan's heart clenched, because Oliver had started drawing pictures of their family, and Leah was always in them, sometimes holding his hand, sometimes with the word Mom written beside her. I think he already sees you as part of something, Ethan said gently, maybe even someone. Leah looked away, blinking fast. But in the silence that followed, they both knew. She wasn't just changing Oliver's life. He was changing hers too. It happened over morning coffee, casual on the surface, but heavy underneath. Leah had just placed Oliver's lunchbox on the counter when Ethan cleared his throat. I've been thinking, he said, his voice steady but careful. You've done so much for Oliver, and for this house. I'd like to offer you a new position, full-time household manager. Better pay, fewer hours. It would give you more time for your studies. And for Hope Haven, Leah froze, her hand still resting on the lunchbox. She didn't turn to face him. That's generous, she said after a beat. You deserve it, Ethan added. I want to support what you're doing. There was a long pause before she finally turned around. Her smile was polite, distant. I appreciate the offer, she said softly, but I have to decline. Ethan blinked. Why? Leah looked down, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. Because I need to do this on my own. If I accept too much help, I'm afraid I'll start to believe I didn't earn where I am. You think I'd see you that way? He asked, hurt flashing in his tone. No, she replied quickly. It's not about how you see me. It's about how I see myself. From that day forward, something shifted. Leah still arrived on time, still cared for Oliver with gentle attention. But the warmth, the small moments of laughter, the casual conversations over coffee, the shared glances in quiet rooms, they began to fade. She stopped sitting in the kitchen after bedtime. She no longer joined Ethan in the garden while Oliver played. Her smiles grew fewer, her words more formal. Ethan felt the distance like a chill creeping into the rooms again. He told himself to respect her boundaries, not to push, but it hurt more than he wanted to admit. Oliver noticed too. Why doesn't Miss Leah read bedtime stories anymore? He asked one night. Ethan didn't know what to say, because the truth was, Leah was pulling away, not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much, and it terrified her. She had built her life on self-reliance, on the belief that needing someone made her weak. And now, in a house that had once felt like a second chance, she was afraid of becoming dependent. Ethan, too, was afraid, but of something else, of losing the only person who had made this house feel like home again. And neither of them knew how to cross the bridge their fears had built. The decision had been sitting quietly in Leah's heart for weeks, like a letter never mailed. She loved the Grayson home, the rhythm of breakfast with Oliver, the quiet mornings folding laundry, the steady presence of Ethan reading by the fire. But there was a deeper calling tugging at her soul, one she couldn't ignore. One rainy morning, she stepped into Ethan's study holding a neatly sealed folder. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice calm but firm. Ethan looked up from his laptop, immediately sensing a shift in the air. Of course, he said. I've been accepted into a part-time social work program, Leah began, and Hope Haven is expanding their outreach, adding evening programs, more therapy sessions. They need someone to help lead, and I think it's time I fully step into that role. Ethan's fingers paused on the keyboard. His face didn't move, but something behind his eyes changed. You're leaving, he said softly. I'll stay 2 more weeks, she added quickly. I want to train someone who'll care for Oliver the right way. He deserves consistency. There was a long silence. You don't owe me anything, Leah, Ethan finally said. But I need you to know you've done more for us than you'll ever understand. Leah's eyes shimmered. You've done more for me, too. She turned to leave, and this time Ethan didn't stop her. But that night, long after the house had gone still, he sat at his desk and pulled out a heavy sheet of cream-colored paper. He didn't know what made him do it, pride, gratitude, or maybe love. But he began to write. It was a letter of recommendation, eloquent, honest, deeply personal. He spoke of Leah's strength, her empathy, her tireless work at Hope Haven, and the way she had transformed a grieving little boy's life, and his father's. He sealed the letter and slipped it into an envelope addressed to the scholarship committee at a foundation he supported anonymously. Inside, he added a note. Her past should not define her future. She is the kind of person the world needs more of. Please help her get there. He didn't sign it. 2 weeks later, at the end of her last day in the Grayson home, Leah opened her mailbox at Hope Haven and found the letter. She read it 3 times. There was no name, but her heart knew. She pressed the envelope to her chest, eyes filled with tears, not because someone helped her, but because someone saw her, not as a burden, not as a charity case, but as someone worth believing in. And that made all the difference. The Hope Haven Gala was held beneath strings of warm lights in the blooming community garden that Leah had helped restore. Tables were lined with white linens and wildflowers. Laughter echoed, mingling with soft music, clinking glasses and the rustle of children weaving between the grown-ups in their best clothes. Leah stood backstage, hands trembling slightly. She had delivered speeches before, but tonight felt different. Tonight was personal. As the MC welcomed her to the stage, the applause rose and then gently quieted. Leah stepped into the soft spotlight, the warm June air brushing her cheeks, her navy gown flowing like ink. She took a breath and looked out at the sea of faces, board members, donors, volunteers, families, and the children she saw as pieces of her own story. I came to Hope Haven as a volunteer, she began, but I stayed because I realized I wasn't just helping others, I was healing something inside myself. The audience leaned in. There was a time I believed that my past defined me, that because I came from nothing, I could never become something. But someone reminded me that wasn't true. A murmur passed through the crowd. I won't name him, though I think he's here tonight. He knows who he is. Her voice caught, but she pressed on. He helped me believe I could dream again, and that I deserved to. Just then, from the back of the garden, a familiar figure stood. Ethan Grayson. Dressed in a charcoal suit, he walked through the crowd as if the earth itself parted to make way. Eyes widened. Whispers began. Leah stared at him, breath frozen in her chest. Ethan climbed the few steps to the stage, stopping just a foot from her. He took the mic with a nod from the MC, then turned to the crowd. I once followed this woman, he said, not out of trust, but out of fear. Fear of being hurt, fear of being wrong. But what I discovered that night changed everything. He turned to Leah, his voice trembling. You didn't just care for my son, you brought him back to life. And you reminded me what love feels like. Leah Monroe, you changed our world. The crowd held its breath. Then slowly, Ethan knelt down on one knee. Gasps swept through the garden. From the front row, a small voice rang out, clear, confident, full of love. Mommy! Leah turned, eyes wide. Oliver stood holding a drawing of 3 stick figures under a sun, labeled Our Family. Tears spilled from her eyes. Ethan opened a small velvet box, revealing a delicate gold ring engraved with 3 names. Ethan, Leah, Oliver. Will you marry me? He asked softly. Will you let us be here forever? The garden stood still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Leah dropped to her knees beside him, hands trembling as she cupped his face. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. The audience erupted into applause. Laughter, cheers, and the sounds of children squealing in joy filled the air. Oliver rushed the stage and threw his arms around both of them. And under the canopy of stars, before a crowd that had witnessed brokenness and healing alike, a family once scattered was made whole. It wasn't just a proposal, it was a homecoming. Peace didn't come all at once. It came gently, like morning light slipping through curtains, like laughter after silence, like a hand that didn't need to be held tightly to feel secure. In the months following the gala, the Grayson household no longer echoed with emptiness. Instead, it sang with life. with footsteps running down the hallway, with Leah's soft humming in the kitchen, with Oliver's giggles as he built blanket forts under the dining table, and sometimes with nothing more than the quiet, content silence that comes when a house finally feels like home. Leah had officially taken on the role of program director at Hope Haven. Under her leadership, the center blossomed. She expanded evening sessions, launched mentorship programs for older teens, and formed partnerships with schools and local businesses. The staff respected her, but more importantly, the children trusted her because she wasn't just there to lead. She was one of them. She remembered the bunk beds, the empty lunch trays, the feeling of being overlooked. And now she used every ounce of that memory to ensure no child under Hope Haven's roof ever felt forgotten. Ethan, in turn, made a choice that stunned his board of directors. He stepped down from his CEO position. After decades of running companies, negotiating mergers, and chasing numbers that never filled the void inside him, he finally understood what he had been running from. Life itself, the real kind. The kind that happened in shared breakfasts, bedtime stories, and impromptu backyard picnics. He didn't disappear from business entirely. He still advised, invested, and supported causes he believed in. But he no longer led from the top of a skyscraper. Instead, he walked Oliver to school. He volunteered at Hope Haven. He learned how to cook Leah's favorite stew, and he spent more time laughing than he ever thought a man like him could. And Oliver, sweet, sensitive Oliver, thrived. The nightmares stopped. The drawings changed. No longer stormy skies or lonely houses. Now they were filled with parks, sunshine, and stick figures holding hands. Always three, sometimes four, if he counted the dog they were planning to adopt. One morning, Ethan found Oliver curled up on the couch with Leah, reading a book about brave animals. The boy looked up and smiled. "We're a team," he said simply. "Like the story." Ethan couldn't help but smile back. "Yeah," he whispered, "the best kind of team." Evenings were slow and intentional. Dinners were shared around the table, phones off. Oliver told stories from school while Leah helped him with spelling. After dishes were done, they'd sit under soft lights in the living room, sometimes talking, sometimes not needing to. There was no more pretending, no more walls, just a rhythm of life built on trust, respect, and love. They planted a tree in the Hope Haven garden that fall, a young maple. Leah called it the second chance tree. Oliver painted a small wooden sign for it. "This is where love grows." Sometimes the three of them would visit it on quiet weekends. They'd bring lemonade and sandwiches and sit under its growing shade, watching other families pass by. Some still searching, some just beginning. Leah often looked at Ethan during those moments, her eyes full but calm. "You ever think," she asked one day, "what would have happened if you hadn't followed me that night?" Ethan chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I think I'd still be hiding behind security cameras, and Oliver might still be afraid of the dark." She smiled. "And I'd probably still be too scared to ask for help." "Good thing we both stopped running," he said. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "No," she whispered. "Good thing we both finally turned towards something instead of away from it." And as autumn leaves rustled in the wind above them, their fingers intertwined, Ethan realized something that didn't need to be said. They were no longer broken people searching for pieces. They were a whole, imperfect, beautiful, and finally complete. A family at last. In a world that moves fast and often overlooks the quiet ones, Leah and Ethan's journey reminds us of something timeless. That healing begins when we allow others to truly see us, and when we dare to believe that kindness is not weakness, but strength. Many of us, especially in later chapters of life, carry regrets, losses, or dreams we once shelved. But as this story shows, it's never too late to rewrite our roles. A grieving widower found love again. A woman with nothing found her voice, and a little boy found not just a parent, but a home. So what can we take from this? That true family isn't always built by blood, but by choice. That second chances often arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary moments. And that helping just one person, holding space for their dreams, can change more lives than we imagine. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever misjudged someone who turned out to be your greatest blessing? What does family mean to you today? Share your story in the comments. Your voice could inspire someone else to hope again. And if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss more soul-stirring stories just like this. Thank you for spending your time with us. May your days be full of meaning, love, and moments that matter. Because sometimes the quietest stories echo the loudest truths.